Grace Sullivan had been a nanny for 23 years. At 51, she'd cared for dozens of childrenna colicky babies, tantrum-prone toddlers, rebellious teenagers. She'd learned patience from every single one of them, learned that children were often trying to tell you something even when they couldn't find the words. But she'd never encountered a situation quite like the one at the Bennett household. The agency had called her on a Tuesday morning, their voice urgent. "Grace, we have an emergency placement. The family has been through 4 nannies in 3 weeks. The baby won't stop crying, and the father is at his wit's end." "How old is the baby?" 9 months. "The mother passed away 2 months ago. Sudden illness. The father is trying to manage." But Grace understood before they finished. Grief complicated everything, especially for a man trying to raise an infant alone. "I'll take it," she said simply. The Bennett estate was impressively modern, expensive, perfectly maintained. Grace was met at the door by a housekeeper named Claire, a younger woman who looked exhausted. "Thank goodness you're here," Claire said. "I don't know how much more Mr. Bennett can take." Even from the entrance hall, Grace could hear the baby crying. It was a raw, desperate sound that made her chest tighten. "How long has he been crying today?" "Since 6 this morning." "It's almost noon now." Claire's voice was strained. "We've tried everything, feeding, changing, rocking, walking. Nothing works. He cries all day, every day. The pediatrician says there's nothing physically wrong with him." Grace followed Claire up the curved staircase to a beautiful nursery of blue walls, expensive furniture, toys everywhere. And in the middle of it all, a red-faced baby sitting on the floor, crying as if his heart was breaking. A man in an expensive suit sat nearby, his head in his hands. He looked younger, maybe 35, and completely shattered. When he heard them enter, he looked up with hollow eyes. "You must be Grace," he said, his voice rough. "I'm Michael Bennett. Thank you for coming. I know this is difficult." Grace approached slowly, her movements calm and measured. She learned long ago that panicked energy only made upset children worse. "Hello, Michael," she said gently. Then she crouched down near the baby, not touching him yet, just being present. "And this must be Lucas." The baby Lucas kept crying, but his eyes found her face. Grace saw intelligence there, and pain, and something else. Recognition, maybe, or hope. "Lucas," she said softly, "I'm Grace. I'm here to help." She held out her hand, palm up, non-threatening. Lucas looked at her hand, then at her face. His crying didn't stop, but it shifted slightly, a less desperate, more questioning. "I know you're scared," Grace continued in that same gentle voice. "I know everything feels wrong, but you're safe. Sweetheart, you're safe." She began to humor an old lullaby her own mother had sung, something wordless and soothing. Lucas's crying wavered, caught between sobs. Grace slowly reached out and picked him up, settling him against her shoulder. She kept humming, swaying gently, one hand rubbing small circles on his back. Lucas hiccuped, his crying stuttering. Then, miraculously, he quieted. Not completely, he still whimpered against her neck, but the screaming stopped. Michael stood up so fast he knocked over a cup on the side table. "How did you?" "No one's been able to calm him in weeks." "Sometimes," Grace said quietly, still swaying, "babies just need someone who isn't afraid of their pain, who can hold it without breaking." Over the following days, Grace began to understand the depth of the problem. Lucas wasn't colicky or difficult, he was grieving. At 9 months old, he couldn't articulate what he'd lost, but he felt it. His mother had been there, constant and loving, and then suddenly she was gone. No explanation, no goodbye, just absence. And Michael, drowning in his own grief, had retreated. Not because he didn't love his son, but because every time he looked at Lucas, he saw his wife. Every cry reminded him of what he'd lost. So he'd hired people to help, keeping himself at a distance, going through the motions of work while feeling nothing. Lucas cried because the one parent he had left had emotionally disappeared. Grace saw all of this within the first week, but she said nothing. Not yet. First, she needed to help Lucas feel secure again, to rebuild his trust in the world. She established routines of the same morning songs, the same feeding schedule, the same bedtime ritual. She talked to Lucas constantly, narrating everything she did, making sure he knew he wasn't alone. She held him when he cried, never trying to rush his feelings or distract him from them. It's okay to be sad, she'd tell him. Sadness is just love that has nowhere to go. And slowly, Lucas began to settle. The constant crying decreased. He started playing with toys again. He'd smile when Grace entered the room. At night, when she held him and sang, he'd rest his head against her shoulder and finally sleep. But there was one consistent pattern. Whenever Michael came into the room, Lucas would start crying again. Grace found Michael in his study one evening, staring at his computer screen without really seeing it. She knocked gently on the door frame. "Mr. Bennett, may I speak with you?" He looked up, and Grace saw the defeat in his face. "If it's to tell me you're quitting too, I understand. I know this situation is impossible." "I'm not quitting." Grace came in and sat down across from him. "But we need to talk about Lucas. The doctors say there's nothing wrong with him." "There isn't." "Not physically." Grace chose her words carefully. "Mr. Bennett, Michaela Lucas is grieving. He lost his mother 2 months ago. And now he's losing his father too." Michael's face went pale. "I haven't left him. I'm here every day." "But are you present? Are you with him, really with him? Or are you going through the motions while keeping your heart locked away?" The silence that followed was heavy. Grace waited. "I can't," Michael finally whispered. "Every time I look at him, I see her. Sarah. She wanted a baby so badly. Lucas has her eyes. Did you know that? Her smile. Every time he looks at me, it's like she's looking at me." And his voice cracked. "I can't breathe." "So you stepped back." "I thought it would help. I thought if I hired the best nannies, the best care, Lucas would be fine and I could survive this." "But he's not fine. He cries constantly, and I don't know how to fix it." Grace leaned forward. "Michael, I'm going to tell you something important. And I need you to really hear it. Lucas doesn't need to be fixed. He needs to be held. He needs to know that even though his mother is gone, his father is still here. Not just physically present, but emotionally available." "I don't know how to do that." "I know. Grief makes us hide from the very things that could heal us." Grace's voice was gentle but firm. "But Lucas can't wait for you to feel ready. He's 9 months old, and his world has shattered. Right now, I'm the only stable thing he has. I hold his pain, I soothe his fears, I show up every single day. And that's good. He needs that. But he also needs his father. He cries every time he sees me, because he's angry, because he's scared, because on some level, even at 9 months old, he knows you've withdrawn from him." Grace paused. "But mostly because he loves you, and he needs you. And he doesn't understand why you won't come close." Michael put his face in his hands. Grace heard him take a shaking breath. "I'm going to lose him too," he said. "Everyone I love. My parents died when I was young, then Sarah, and now Lucas looks at me like I'm a stranger. I've already lost him." "No," Grace said firmly. "You haven't. But you will if you don't do the hard work of showing up, of being present even when it hurts, of holding him even when it breaks your heart." The next morning, Grace brought Lucas downstairs for breakfast. Michael was there, sitting at the kitchen table. When he saw them, he stood up, and Grace saw determination in his face. "Can I hold him?" Michael asked. Lucas immediately started fussing, turning his face into Grace's neck. "It's okay," Grace said softly to the baby. "That's Daddy. He loves you very much." She passed Lucas to Michael. The baby started to cry, pushing against his father's chest. Michael's arms tightened, but Grace saw the pain on his face. "Don't put him down," Grace said. "I know it's hard, but don't give up." Michael nodded, his jaw tight. He started to walk, bouncing Lucas gently, the way he'd probably done months ago, before everything fell apart. "Hey, buddy," he said, his voice shaking. "It's me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I've been gone. I was scared, and I was sad, and I didn't know how to be your dad without your mom here to show me how." Lucas kept crying, but it was different now. Not the panicked screaming of recent weeks, but something more fundamental. Grief meeting grief. "I miss her too," Michael said, tears streaming down his face now. "I miss her so much. But you're still here, and I love you. And I promise I'm not going anywhere." He held his son and cried for the first time since Sarah's death. And Lucas, feeling his father's arms around him, feeling the truth in his voice, began to quiet. Grace slipped out of the room, giving them privacy. She stood in the hallway and wiped her own eyes. This was always the hardest part of her job, watching parents and children find their way back to each other through grief. The healing didn't happen overnight. There were setbacks, difficult days, moments when Michael wanted to retreat and Lucas responded with tears. But Grace was there, coaching and encouraging, teaching Michael how to be present with his son's pain instead of trying to fix it. She taught him the songs that soothed Lucas, showed him how to read the baby's cues, helped him understand that being a grieving father was still being a father, that his sadness didn't disqualify him from parenting, it made him human. "Sarah would want me to be strong for him," Michael said one evening, watching Lucas play on the floor. "Sarah would want you to be honest with him," Grace corrected gently. "Children don't need perfect parents. They need real ones. Parents who show them that it's okay to hurt, that feelings are meant to be felt, that you can be sad and still move forward." Within a month, Lucas had stopped his constant crying. He laughed again, played again, explored his world with curiosity. And most importantly, he sought out his father. When Michael came home from work, Lucas would crawl to him, arms up, face bright with recognition and joy. Michael would scoop him up, holding him close, no longer afraid of the feelings that came with that embrace. Grace watched this transformation with quiet satisfaction. This was why she'd stayed in this work for over 2 decades. These moments when broken families learn to heal, when love found its way through grief. 6 months after Grace arrived, she and Michael sat in the nursery, watching Lucas sleep in his crib. The baby was peaceful now, one hand clutching his favorite blanket, his breathing soft and even. "I don't know how to thank you," Michael said quietly. "You saved us, both of us." "You saved yourselves," Grace replied. "I just held space while you figured out how." "You did more than that. You showed me that running from pain doesn't make it disappear. That the only way through grief is, well, through it. That I had to feel it to heal it. Those are hard lessons." "They are, but necessary ones." Michael looked at his sleeping son with such love that Grace felt her throat tighten. "He's teaching me too, you know, every day. How to be present. How to find joy even when you're sad. How to live in the moment instead of drowning in what's been lost." "Children are remarkable teachers," Grace agreed. "Will you stay?" Michael asked suddenly. "I know you usually move on to other families after a few months, but yeah, we need you. Not forever, but maybe until Lucas is older. Until I'm more confident. Until you feel steady again," Grace finished. "Of course I'll stay, as long as you need me." Grace stayed for 2 more years, watching Lucas grow from a grief-stricken baby into a joyful toddler, then into a curious preschooler. She watched Michael transform from a man hiding from his pain into a father fully present in his son's life. On her last day, Lucas, now 3 years older, gave her a drawing he'd made. It showed 3 stick figures, a tall one, a small one, and a medium one with curly hair. "That's Daddy, that's me, and that's you," Lucas explained seriously. "You're our family." Grace hugged him close, breathing in his little boy smell of soap and playground dust. "I'll always be part of your family, sweetheart." "Always." That evening, Michael gave her an envelope. Inside was a check of far more than her salary and a letter. Grace read it later, in her own small apartment, tears streaming down her face. "Dear Grace, you came into our lives when we were drowning. Lucas was crying constantly, and I was dying inside, and neither of us knew how to reach each other. You taught us how to grieve, how to heal, and how to love each other through the pain. You showed me that being a parent means showing up even when you're broken. That children don't need perfecter, they need present. That the greatest gift I could give my son was my honest, whole self, complete with scars and sadness and the slow journey toward joy. Lucas calls you family, and he's right. You are family, not because of blood, but because you held us when we couldn't hold each other. Because you stayed when everyone else left. Because you believed we could heal before we believed it ourselves. Thank you for being the voice that calmed my son. Thank you for being the strength that rebuilt our family. Thank you for teaching us that love is stronger than grief, that presence is more powerful than perfection, and that sometimes the people who save us arrive when we least expect them. With love and gratitude always, Michael and Lucas. Grace folded the letter carefully and looked out her window at the city lights. She thought about all the families she'd helped over the years, all the children she'd soothed, all the parents she'd coached through impossible situations. This was her clinger, not to be perfect, but to be present, to show up in people's darkest moments and help them find their way back to light. To teach them that grief and love could coexist, that healing was possible, that family was built not just through biology but through showing up, again and again, even when it hurt. Lucas hadn't needed someone to stop his crying. He'd needed someone to hear what his crying meant, that he was scared, that he was grieving, that he needed connection more than comfort. And Michael hadn't needed someone to care for his son so he didn't have to. He'd needed someone to show him how to care, how to be present, how to father through grief instead of despite it. Grace had given them both what they needed most, not solutions, but presence. Not fixes, but understanding. Not distance, but the courage to come close. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give another person is simply this, the willingness to stand with them in their pain, to hold their grief without trying to take it away, to believe in their capacity to heal even when they've forgotten it themselves. That was the gift Grace had given the Bennett family, and in return, they'd given her the gift of witnessing their healing, of the slow, beautiful process of a father and son learning to hold each other through sorrow and find their way back to joy.